the fellowship of the Holy Spirit, with us all evermore. Amen.
Announcements. Good morning, Senators. I applaud you on being really on time this morning and apologize for the delay we had downstairs. I beg to report that I have received correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Assembly advising that the following motions and bills were passed in the House of Assembly on Tuesday, 20th November 2018, and forwarded to the Senate for its concurrence. Finance Administration Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow capital or recurrent expenditure services of consultants to conduct implementation workshops and to set up a performance management and delivery unit. Companies Amendment, International Trust Amendment, International Business Companies Amendment, International Partnership Amendment, Income Tax Amendment, Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment, Agreement on Extradition, St. Lucia and the French Republic, Free Zone Amendment, Child Care Protection and Adoption, Child Justice. Statements from Ministers. Papers to be laid. Honorable Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister responsible for public service and leader of government business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 87 of 2018, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Electronic Litigation Filing and Service Procedure Rules. Statutory Instrument Number 89 of 2018, St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, Diamond VA4 Vesting Order. Statutory Instrument Number 95 of 2018, Income Tax Double Taxation Relief, United Kingdom Revocation Order. Statutory Instrument Number 97 of 2018, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 15 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 91 of 2018, Standards Amendment Number 1 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 92 of 2018, Standards Amendment Number 2 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 93 of 2018, Standards Compulsory Standard Amendment Number 2 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 94 of 2018, Standards Compulsory Standard Amendment Number 3 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 96 of 2018, Price Control Amendment Number 15 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 88, actually, Madam, yeah. Statutory Instrument Number 88 of 2018, Tourism Stimulus and Investment Wild Serenity St. Lucia Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 90 of 2018, Tourism Stimulus and Investment Spice Travel Limited Order.
It appears the order was changed around.
Yes.
The number, yes, I had to follow as well. But you did cite all of them.
Yes, okay.
Motions. Honorable Leader of Government Business. Motions. The correct terminology is motions.
Madam President, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Finance Administration Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or recurrent expenditure. Services of consultants to conduct implementation labs, workshops, and to set up a performance management and delivery unit. Whereas it is provided by Section 39(1) of the Finance Administration Act, capped 1501, that the Minister for Finance may, by resolution of Parliament, borrow money from a bank or other financial institution for capital expenditure of government. Proceed.
Yes, yes.
And whereas the Minister for Finance considers it necessary to borrow from the Caribbean Development Bank an amount not exceeding US $4,927,210, consisting of a special funds resources portion in the amount of US $2,463,605, and an ordinary capital resources portion in the amount of US $2,463,605,000 for the purpose of financing the services of consultants to conduct implementation labs, workshops, and to set up a performance management and delivery unit. And whereas, in the case of the special funds resources portion, the loan is repayable in 40 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each due date of the first day of January, the first day of April, the first day of July, and the first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date after the expiration of 2 years following the date of the loan agreement, or on such later due date as the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. And the interest rate is payable quarterly at a rate of 1% per annum, withdrawn and outstanding on the amount of the special funds resources portion. B, in the case of the ordinary capital resources portion, the loan is repayable in 40 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each due date of the first day of January, the first day of April, the first day of July, and the first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date after the expiration of 2 years following the date of the loan agreement, or on such later date as the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. 2, the interest is payable quarterly at a rate of 4.8% per annum, withdrawn and outstanding on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion. And 3, a commitment charge at the rate of 1% per annum is payable quarterly on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion, unwithdrawn, and which accrues from the 60th day following the date of the loan agreement. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow from the Caribbean Development Bank an amount not exceeding US $4,927,210, consisting of a special funds resources portion in the amount of US $2,463,605 and an ordinary capital resources portion in the amount of US $2,463,605 for the purpose of financing the services of consultants to conduct implementation labs workshops and to set up a performance management and delivery unit. Be it further resolved that A, in the case of the special funds resources portion, the loan is repayable in 40 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each due date of the first day of January, the first day of April, the first day of July, and the first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date after the expiration of 2 years following the date of the loan agreement, or on such later due date as the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. And 2, the interest is payable quarterly at a rate of 1% per annum, withdrawn and outstanding on the amount of the special funds resources portion. And B, in the case of the ordinary capital resources portion, the loan is repayable in 40 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each due date of the first day of January, the first day of April, the first day of July, and the first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date after the expiration of 2 years following the date of the loan agreement, or on such later due date as the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. 2, the interest is payable quarterly at a rate of 4.8% per annum, withdrawn and outstanding on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion. And 3, a commitment charge of the rate of 1% per annum is payable quarterly on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion unwithdrawn, and which accrues from the 60th day following the date of the loan agreement. Madam President, one of the mandates, and if not one of the important mandates of this administration, is that of ensuring that there is growth in our economy. Now, growth, Madam President, most times is indicated by the indicator gross domestic product, GDP. Now, I know, Madam President, that many people will question and the significance of GDP. I've heard it many, many times on social media, on talk shows. But growth is something that we must achieve. Because growth, Madam President, is a measure of the level of economic activity that occurs in the country within a specific year. That's the GDP. And we believe that with more economic activity, you provide more opportunities for individuals and businesses alike. And it's in that vein, Madam President, that we see the need and the importance of growing the economy. And I must say, Madam President, that we are seeing signs of growth in this country, in this economy. I must remind the public and this House, Madam President, that when we took on the reins of government in on June 6, 2016, we found a very anemic economy. One whereby the rate of unemployment was close to 24% or 25%, and that of the youth unemployment was 50%. I say growth, Madam President, is significant for this government. So, Madam President, we realize that there are many factors that can contribute to growth, or many factors that can actually impede growth. But we are here to focus on the factors that will assist us in growing the economy. This motion, Madam President, is geared at assisting in achieving this goal. Madam President, we believe that in the absence of a medium-term economic framework, we are just shooting in the air, no targets. So this government has undertaken the development of the medium-term economic framework, in which, Madam President, we believe that we need to target specific sectors. And this process, Madam President, first started with the ministers of government, where we had a workshop with the consultants, where we were able to identify the key sectors in our economy. And this was done very scientifically, of course, Madam President. And the consultation moved beyond the cabinet ministers, and there were engagements with the various stakeholders outside of government, Chamber of Commerce, and so on. So, Madam President, we were able to identify 6 key areas: 3 social and 3 economic. The 3 social, Madam President: crime, health, and education. And the 3 economic sectors: tourism, agriculture, and infrastructure. So, Madam President, yes, we have identified the various key areas that need to be targeted, but this is just the beginning of the process. We believe, Madam President, that even after you identify these areas and various targets or outcomes from these areas, we need to put a vehicle in place to achieve such targets. And that's why the CDB engaged the government of St. Lucia in creating what they call, what we refer to as workshop labs, in ensuring, Madam President, that whatever we say we'll undertake, we will fulfill these undertakings. So implementation, Madam President, is important in that process. Implementation. And that is, Madam President, a big issue in government. Because to achieve the growth, there are public sector investment programs and services that we must undertake as a government to achieve these goals, to achieve these outcomes. And therefore, if we fall short of these programs and services, we will fall short of our growth. And therefore, Madam President, this workshop, as we speak, Madam President, is currently being undertaken by the consultants with the various stakeholders, even as we speak, Madam President. So implementation, we are hoping, coming out of this workshop, that the public officers and others will be better equipped in ensuring that the public sector investment programs of government are executed in a timely manner and executed to the point where we would have achieved the required outcomes. So, Madam President, I am happy, I'm very pleased that we are undertaking this project. And I'm very pleased that we were able to get the funding from the CDB at this reasonable peppercorn rate. And I do hope, Madam President, that we get the full support of the House on this motion. Thank you.
Senators, the question is that Parliament authorize the Minister for Finance to borrow from the Caribbean Development Bank an amount not exceeding US $4,927,210,000, consisting of special funds resources portion in the amount of $2,463,605, and an ordinary capital resources portion in the amount of US $2,463,665 for the purpose of financing the services of consultants to conduct implementation workshops and to set up a performance management and delivery unit. Be it further resolved that in the case of the special funds resources portion, 1, the loan is repayable in 40 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each due date of the first day of January, the first day of April, the first day of July, and the first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date after the expiration of 2 years following the date of the loan agreement or on such later due date as the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. And 2, the interest is payable quarterly at a rate of 1% per annum, withdrawn and outstanding on the amount of the special funds resources portion. B, in the case of the ordinary capital resources portion, 1, the loan is repayable in 40 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each due date of the first day of January, the first day of April, and the first day of July, and the first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date after the expiration of 2 years following the date of the loan agreement or on such later due date as the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. 2, the interest is payable quarterly at a rate of 4.8% per annum, withdrawn and outstanding on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion. And 3, a commitment charge at the rate of 1% per annum is payable quarterly on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion unwithdrawn and which accrues from the 60th day following the date of the loan agreement. Senator Henry.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, can you grant me leave first in recognizing the performance of the West Indies cricket team, the female West Indies cricket team here in St. Lucia. They did very, very well, Madam President. And of course, I think it's in place that we just say this because St. Lucians turned out in large numbers to support them. That's unprecedented in terms of the kind of support we've seen for the female West Indies team. This is really, really encouraging. Thank God it was at the Darren Sami cricket ground, and a ground belonged to us and not that belonged to Theo King or Ojo Labs. So indeed, we are thankful for such a wonderful place. Yes, you could continue beating your drums, but of course it's indeed a wonderful experience for us St. Lucians to be at the home ground and watch the ladies of the Caribbean do so well. I was indeed pleased. Yeah. Madam President, I am here to speak on this motion. And as I listened to the leader of government business made his pronouncement to justify, as it were, borrowing, for a moment I heard he was singing a lullaby and his voice went up, but there was modulation. And I suspect when it went down, this may be to remind us that it's not all very well with us at this point in time in our economy. But at the time when his voice went up, I was saying to myself, Madam President, maybe the public servants are listening and everybody in St. Lucia are hearing that it is well in St. Lucia. You could get your salary increases. We can do everything right. There's money enough for everyone. The hospitals can be fixed because the voice went up, almost echoing, as it were, a good day. Hallelujah. A hallelujah day. Of course, the civil servants are hearing and they may have sensed and may have read from your presentation this morning, and I hope that you would meet them and you would give them what they're asking, and other persons as well. But let's get into this substantive discussion, that of borrowing. And I want to speak to it, Madam President, just from three angles. One, trend versus promises. Two, the priorities and relevance. And finally, the Creole response to reckless borrowing. Let us look at trend and promises. Madam President, I believe that this administration, this side of government, on this part of history have borrowed more monies in 2 years than John Compton may have borrowed in probably 15 years. Subject to be corrected. But this is a lot of borrowing. And when you juxtapose this to the promises made, this government said that they would not be borrowing. They said they would not be borrowing. Do not try to qualify. Do not try to qualify it now. Do not try to qualify it now. There's records, and there's a young lady, Madam President, and I wish a lot of St. Lucians probably take that same approach, a young lady from ancillary countries. She verbatim just measuring what was said as against what is happening, and that is so beautiful. I suspect this is one of the major developments in our political history where ordinary people can hold politicians to account. Ou di ou pa te kay prete l'argent pièce. C'est ça ou te dit. Pas vin di ou pa te kay prete si la pa ni l'argent pour vie payer. Ou di ou pa te kay prete l'argent. Mais ou a prete tellement l'argent. Billion dollars à de 2 années a prete. So that's why this morning you had to sing the lullaby of growth. Growth. Madam President, in my lifetime, and the way I grew up and where I grew up, Madam President, this is easy for me to understand. Easy for me to understand. Because, Madam President, there are homes. When you grew up, you would see the father driving a fancy car. But if you're from Marshall, Madam President, not long you would hear the wife. She would speak loud enough and tell him that, hey, you're not caring for the children. All you're doing is driving a fancy car. Of course, there was growth in the family, but it did not resonate with members of the family. The growth that you're speaking about, one, I will tell you that it doesn't resonate with the rest of the population. Everybody in St. Lucia, the majority of St. Lucians are not speaking about growth. Madam President, I am in Dominica most of the time, and you believe Roseau is the capital of Castries. All the workers I know to be craftsmen, masons and carpenters are in Roseau, working. If there was such growth, why are there so many St. Lucians, Madam President, in Dominica? Is this what has contributed to your growth? The fact that St. Lucians are there working? In fact, a mason told me that in his category doesn't believe that there's anybody left in Bexon to do masonry work, and he's a good craftsman. Don't smile. I will not reveal, Madam President, some things that I know. Oh, you have 5 from Bexar working for you. Well done. In fact, Madam President, there are members here who have businesses participating in the one way or the other in the aspects of development in St. Lucia, and I'm happy for you on this side. But be careful that it is not a conflict of interest. I know you're a very good businessman, so I would hope that it is not conflict of interest. But those five still live in Bexar. So I agree, but I'm saying just hope that it's not conflict of interest, because you also the chairman of the Housing Corporation. But I'm saying, Madam President, that
Madam President, I rise on a point of Section 37.
Rise on the point of what, Madam President? I didn't hear anything.
Order. Point of order. Section 37. 5. No senator shall impute improper motives by any member of either chamber. So by saying that directing his comments to the Senator Mangal is imputing improper motives, and that should not be done.
Thank you very much, Madam President. If I have said anything to impute proper motives, I withdraw it, sir. I would in no way. But I did say that I hope it's not conflict of interest, and I do not think it's conflict of interest. However, last week I got the barrage of Ida Inc.
Senator Henry.
Yeah.
When you withdraw, you withdraw. You don't comment again on the withdrawal, because you might be erring again.
Thank you very much for your guidance. I will do withdraw. Yes, let me proceed. I think the substantive point needs to be made. That there are people working in Dominica. Roseau is like Castries. You know, so many, Madam President, I suspect maybe I can account personally knowing at least 30 to 50 individuals working in Roseau. And there's growth, construction, the regular construction workers. So I can account for at least 30 working in Roseau. My friend on the other side said that he can account for 5 working in St. Lucia. Oh, with him. Okay, thanks. You know, but the point I'm making, Madam President, is that the growth that you speak about to justify borrowing, and I'm going to get to this, you did promise St. Lucians, and St. Lucians know that for a fact that you cannot deny, because you campaign on this. And I said it during the election period. I told St. Lucians, and I said it here, it is one thing to campaign, it's another thing to govern. You campaigned that you would not be borrowing because the last administration was reckless. If you quantify the amount of borrowing that has taken place, chaque l'année nous venons ici, c'est pour prêter l'argent. Borrow, borrow, borrow. So, you promised that you would not be borrowing, but you have been borrowing. So the trend is that you're borrowing and you're borrowing. And Madam President, one of the things that, a point that I need to make, and it's very important, that when this administration presented the last budget, there was a theme: building resilience today for the future. That was the theme. Building resilience today for the future. When I heard the theme, at the time I thought that was quite an ambitious theme. But Madam President, I would like to state that one characteristic of resilience is the ability to bounce back after a shock. The ability to bounce back. And when you go into one of the characteristics of resilience is your ability to bounce back. And as one who has been performing loss adjusting roles for a company in Dominica after Maria, Madam President, which taught me a lot of life lessons. Life lessons. Madam President, we are so vulnerable in this island. So vulnerable that we're not aware of it. And for example, I heard the member for the last time spoke of housing. Madam President, this is an area of vulnerability when we are exposed to hurricanes like Category 5. So many middle-income people have not recovered in Dominica. Either underinsured, some of them own what they could not have maintained. So your ability to bounce back after a shock, after a disaster, is important. But if you are borrowing so much, where is the fiscal place to maneuver if there is a disaster in this country? Si la ni un gros problème, si la ni un cyclone qui vient croiser pied, si vous ka prêter l'argent tellement, ou jusqu'à prêter l'argent pour assiser avec manger, $14 million for workshop. And Madam President, I'll speak a little deeper on this workshop thing. Madam President, I've been in the public service for 25 years. I've been in workshops. In fact, just before I left in 2015, I think there was a consultant here dealing with budgeting. To sit with him, and you have to put your objectives and all of those things together and show what are you going to do. Some of what is mentioned there. Madam President, over 25 years in the public service, there have been workshops upon workshops doing this very same thing. Or people leave, so you're retooling. Madam President, I understand that point too. But I will tell you one of the things I've discovered, Madam President. At the workshops, people leave the workshops and go out, you know. During my time. You know why? I know that already. I tired headed people repeating the same thing. That's true. And if you send them overseas, they leave the workshops and they go and shop. Oh, that sounds like me. Oh, yeah. You investigate your permanent secretaries and come back to me. You understand? Or ask them to submit the reports. I am telling you, Madam President, there is almost a level of wastage that all of us can identify. But why do you borrow for workshops? Pour you kay prêter l'argent pour ni workshops pour bay moun mayonnaise avec pain. You know, mayonnaise with tuna fish in between it and juice. And then you have free breaks. Breakfast breaks, lunch break and tea break. And after lunch break, they're not returning, you know, Madam President. You couldn't find them after lunch break. They're not returning. Because they have to pick up their children. You understand? Why are you going to spend $14 million on workshops to advance the cause of this country? And you know it's a wastage. That's strong. I'm not afraid to say it. As a matter of fact, in coming here in 2018, I asked myself, what am I going to say about this? I am not you that probably just come by. I spent 25 years in the public service, sir. And as a St. Lucian, my heart bleed. It bleeded then and even now as to what we do with monies in the name of development. And I move quickly into the area of priorities. Not just that I find it's a waste, but what else can you do with $14 million, Madam President? $14 million. Madam President, you could run short-term employment for 12 years, employing 2,500 persons. 12 years, employing 2,500 persons. Step. You understand? $1 million a year. Instead of sending people to sit in a workshop to eat tuna fish sandwich with mayonnaise, you could employ 2,000 persons for 12 years cleaning the streets. Priority. I'm not saying you should do that, but that's one. I saw a hospital last night on YouTube, Madam President, where the sewer line or some line is pouring. Breakdown. I heard there's a need to renovate Castries Comprehensive School at $13 million, Madam President, about quantity survey, and I jump up when I heard that. Jump up. Madam President, how high? I'll tell you. It's because I spent 25 years in the public service. I started there as grade 12 as a quantity surveyor. I moved to grade 14, grade 16. I was the senior quantity surveyor in the Ministry of Planning. And we built the school next door, Madam President. The next door. Oh, yes, we built it at $1.8 million for the tallest block.
Madam President, I rise on a point of order.
Can you put rise or shy or Jody?
All right, well, I'll continue rising, but Section 37 indicates that the senator shall confine his observations to the subject matter on the discussions. I don't see how Cassius Comprehensive falls under the subject matter that we're dealing with. And I mean, you're just grandstanding. You need to.
Senator Henry, let us stick to the observations and the discussion, please.
Madam President, I wouldn't stop you all when you all, I notice everybody's taking notes, so at some point in time you all will be coming back to respond. I know that. There'll be 4 persons responding, one after the other. So I don't know why you're afraid to allow me to make my contribution. But Madam President, I'm speaking about the priorities, what you could do with $13 million. Because we are borrowing $13 million for a workshop. I do not know how else can I contribute to the debate if I do not share. And I did praise in my contribution, Madam President, by highlighting, I will speak to it in terms of trend and promises, priorities, and relevance. And finally, the Creole approach to reckless borrowing. That's how I stated, Madam President, that I would make my contribution. So I said, yes, Madam President, the Minister of Finance did say that it needs $14 million to renovate, and I'm saying that $14 million will not be needed, but we can fix the Cassius Comprehensive School. That's what I'm saying. Priority than for a workshop. We can fix the hospital. We could complete St. Jude. Madam President, for a moment, I am thinking, are we in this sort of a mindset of absurdity, or are we in a mindset of like we are all insane and we cannot speak to or say when something is not right? Is it not fair to articulate something that is different? We all must say the same thing? Why do we have 2 Nobel laureates? Because we are a country of brilliance. And I'm saying that borrowing $13 million in 2018 for a workshop to tell people how to implement. Madam President, I would tell you one of the things I've witnessed in some of those workshops. These St. Lucians that have left our public service, go and work for those donor agencies, come back and stand in front of us to tell us the things that they said while they were there. So they use them. So they may use Dr. Anthony George to come and sit before us. He was at the ministry already. And tell us the things that he said before. And to what extent that we adhere to those things. There's a culture part of it, Madam President. A deep part of our problem in the public service is one political commitment to processes and procedures, you know. There are a lot of things that have been said to the public service over the years, some of them sitting there and they resist them. So when they tell them prepare a sort of targeting instrument to provide support, I use that for an example, Madam President. So CDB say, look here, you need to come up with all of the poor communities. I have $9 million, and you need to rank as to which communities should benefit from the resources. I am only supporting educational, water and sanitation. I forget the third one. This is on the BNTF, Basic Need Trust Fund Program 9. Madam President, we went through the process. We selected 50 communities, 60 of the poorest communities, based on our poverty indicators. We submitted them, and then we apply or overlay the priorities or the areas the CDB wants to intervene. And we found Dennery, where we would do a preschool costing $1.something million. And the next community that happened to, after all of the communities benefited, we had a little bit of surplus because the amount of money also is a factor, was Goodlands. Goodlands got a little road. a little footpath because they were on the 50. There are members of this administration out there saying that this last administration implemented project politically in Goodlands, whereas it's the CDB that has its own process. So if we did a Goodlands project, why did we do a preschool in Dennery? Why did the same instrument from CDB allow us to implement a preschool that costed more money in Dennery then? Why did the Labour Party build a preschool in Dennery? And I'm talking about Dennery South. $1.2 million, that's what the tool produced. We adhere to it. But you know what? For the two, and I'm talking about adhering to these things that we'll be doing in the so-called lab, workshops. I call it so-called because you've not articulated exactly what it is. The labs, the workshops. So, Madam President, and I need to know how much time I have left because I do not want to. 2 hours, thank you. Thank you, but you are not the authority of the House. I would do with it because there's a lot I can say. But, Madam President.
Senator, you have 15 minutes left.
Thank you very much, 15 minutes. So, Madam President, the issue of borrowing $13 million at this time. $13 million to do workshops when you promised that you would not be borrowing. You cannot justify this. You cannot. Workshops in the public service. During the time of the Prime Minister Sir John, Miss Zenith James, Miss Permanent, the Director of Finance, when I started with them at that time, there weren't many workshops then. They did the work. These people are trained. We have some of the best trained individuals in the public service. We have. That's what you're doing now? Well, I know before you came, we had the best. Avant venir tout any primaire, moi pas savoir qui ça fait yo. You understand? I don't know. You're all confused right now. Are you all coming from this side, going on that side? 50% of you all on that side confused because 50% on your side came from on the other side. In fact, I think 75%. Zot malad, mon pasa. You understand? Mon pasa là. I'm telling you. But Madam President, this is how I would put it in Creole term. Borrowing, reckless borrowing. Reckless borrowing in Creole term. And this is how it is experienced. Madam President, just imagine you, and I rather say it in Creole, you know. I prefer the Creole part of it. And you sort of the famille, l'école fermée. L'école fermée, c'est vacances. Tout le monde à la cour, ka jouer, toute maman ka jouer. Maman wa kaila, l'école fermée, l'école ka ouvert, so vous savez. Maman ou n'y a toi pour acheter livre l'école pour l'école qui est ouvert. Il même pas ouais l'argent, côté l'argent qui a sorti pour y acheter livre l'école, pour y acheter uniforme. Mais gars ça, ou aller voir kaya moun écoute tant moun ka dit ishli ka aller à sous vacances. So why kaya écoute dit mommy, Don and them say they going to New York on holidays. And Miss Carmen say, if you can come up with the ticket money, I will go with them. And then your mother responds by telling
Madam President, may I invoke section 37 of the standing order? It says, subject to the provisions of the standing orders, debates upon any motion, bill, or amendment shall be relevant to such motion, bill, or amendment, and the senator shall confine his observations to the subject under discussion. Madam President, this is a discussion about the motion that was brought to the House for the borrowing of 4.2 or 4.3 million US dollars for the undertaking of workshop training for our public servants. And I need to remind the leader of government, the leader of opposition, business that this is not a political platform, but this is the House. And I believe, Madam President, he needs to confine his contribution to the motion before us right now.
Yes, Madam President. So I was just putting it in Creole term, what reckless borrowing look like. So your mother would say to you...
So, Senator Henry,
yeah.
What I would say is that I understand that you wish to show fine examples as to why the borrowing should be for different reasons.
Yeah.
But I will cite section 44 and remind you that you've made the point several times, and tedious repetition is not in order. So I'll ask you to proceed.
Yes, Madam President. Thank you. So, Madam President, thank you. And I'm ending on this note. I'm really ending on this note. That when you approach your parent to acquire something that is not within her reach, like asking her to go on holidays with a next family with neighbor children who are able to do so because she has something more important to do for you. She's not aware as to where she's getting the resources to take you to school, to get your school books and this sort of thing. She would meet your request with a certain language. And a good parent would tell you, so do vamwe exhibitis like a ukadia. And Madam President, I see government as a more elaborate family. In fact, 160,000 people in a population. I've been to China where there are billions of people. And I've been to the hills in one family setting in China that was more than the population of St. Lucia. In fact, you entered the family gate. And I've always likened the development agenda of St. Lucia like somebody being in charge of a large family. And as you take decisions, Madam President, I'm not the expert in economics, but I think you could reduce what you're doing from the perspective of what a good parent would do. And that is why, Madam President, the ordinary St. Lucians would understand the analogy that I brought to them. What are the priorities? We have the hospital that need fixing. We have schools that need fixing. You're going to take $13 million and invest in workshop and using standing orders to tell me I cannot say that where I feel like I'm on the market step. In fact, that's the best place to discuss it, it looks like. Maybe it's a good place to discuss it. I do not want to be restrained by saying what I've said, but I'm saying it with due respect. It is not the best thing to do with $13 million at this time, especially if you're going to borrow it. Upani lahan, ukai pwete lahan, pwai by moon sandwich. That is what I'm discussing. And Madam President, I'm making this point because we've done this over and over again in the public service over 25 years. And the people would tell you, you would hear the refrain, the thing, I've done this already, I know that already, there's nothing new under the sun. As a matter of fact, most of those consultants usually start with a précis, I am not coming and tell you anything that is new. That's how they start their consultancies with. And we all know it. You understand? And they're going to tweak it here and there. We have a competent public service. We have a competent public service. You believe that Madam President, I am speaking to you. For this member to believe that only now we have a competent public service, I think he's out of this world. You should have been there when there were the likes of Miss Jennifer James. You should have been where I worked with Mr. Anthony and what have you. I worked back then in the 80s. We are able to do a lot more. So do not come and make it seem like now we have. Is this what I heard the leader of government business saying? Only now we have a competent public service? I rest my case here. I leave you for them. They will judge you because I believe they are far much better than what you say. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Senator Mangal.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me stand as well and congratulate the female West Indies cricket team, our ladies that we're so proud of, for winning all 3 of the games in St. Lucia. And most of all, let me thank our people in this island. It tells us that we still have a passion. We have a passion for cricket. And most of all, we have a thirst to see that our team do well and our team are proceeding in the winning ways. So when the crowd stayed away previously in certain games, in my opinion, it was a form of demonstration that, listen, we need you to perform better. But when our people and our team, especially our female cricketers, do well, you saw that level of enthusiasm and jubilance and the support coming from St. Lucia. And I heard it has been said that it is in Darren Sammy's cricket stadium. Yes, it is. Darren Sammy, a proud son of the soil, a wonderful facility named after him. And it's not in a T.O. Aking or in a DSH grounds or a horse race track and so on. I don't know the relevance of that. But what I can simply say is that the games happen in St. Lucia with the support of our people in St. Lucia. And most of all, if this government did not provide the necessary facilities and support, we would not have had such a successful set of games in this country. So when we're giving our kudos, let's give it to this government of the United Workers' Party as well. Okay, because those need the various support as well. So all of our people, including this government, played their part.
Senator Mangal, if we're giving congratulations, that's what it's about. It's not a motion, it's not a debate.
All right.
So let's move on.
Thank you very much. So again, let me congratulate our ladies for a job well done, and I wish them all the best in the semifinals coming up on Thursday night in Antigua. Very well. That's tonight. Yeah, right. Yes. Madam President, I sat there being rather amazed at the many contradictions that I've heard in this one statement today from the leader of the opposition business. At one time, he referred to our civil servants as being persons who would simply go on a break in any workshop. By the time they pass lunchtime, they're going to go and look for their children. They are going to go and look to take their children home, and they will not even come back to these workshops, and so on. These were his exact words. Yet still he concluded by saying that our civil servants are very competent, right? And our civil servants are well trained, etc. Which one, Mr. Senator? Which one do you really believe? Which one do you really believe? Right? You're lashing out at our civil servants, and then at the other end, you're congratulating them. The double standards, the various double standards. I also saw, Madam President, legitimate businesses on the attack here today as well. Legitimate businesses. Referring to myself as the chairman of the National Housing Corporation and employing people in the construction sector. What is wrong with that, Madam President, with my company employing people within the construction sector? As a matter of fact, my company, which was established in the 1990s, have provided employment. And as a proud St. Lucian, I will always continue to provide employment for our people in this country.
Madam President, point of order, section 35(1). The member should limit his speech to the matter that is before the House. You only can respond to me, the member cannot respond to me. He must make his contribution. You're the only person that can rebut.
35(1) is not that, Senator. 35(1) is...
Sorry, Madam, 36A.
Get it right, get it right. Get it right.
What are you standing on? 36A? 36A is the point of order.
Yes. Madam President, I'm asking that the member confine his contribution to the subject matter before this House.
That's not 36A either, Senator. It's 37(1) you're referencing? 37(1)?
Yes, Madam President.
You're all over the place. You're still in
Senator Mangal, would you remain on the subject under discussion, and remember rebuttals are for the person who has moved the motion.
Very well, Madam President. So I must say that in support of this motion, for the purpose of financing the services of consultants to conduct implementation labs, workshops, and to set up the performance management and delivery unit, Madam President, this in itself I support totally. In business, in government, we must continue the process of training our people and having workshops for our people. In the private sector, you hear it all the time, refresher courses. Even in small businesses, even if you hire trained staff, you need every now and then to have refresher programs to also to have persons informing them and keeping them up to date with the development trends, etc. And also ensuring that they abide by this. In the public sector, it's no difference. I believe we have very competent public servants, Madam President. But I also believe that those civil servants, from time, every now and then, would require some refresher courses, right? We would also require some form of workshop or some form of training. And this is what this government is doing. And also setting up a performance management delivery unit. Madam President, how can we go anywhere if we do not set the platform, if we do not train our people? How can we go anywhere? The comparison is being made that why are we spending so much money in training and why we're not spending this money in STEP, for example? But this is the very problem that we have in this country, right? And this falls down in the heart of the opposition because they are more socialist than anything else. You see, here comes the ideology that you must always be subservient to me. I must be the master. I must be the boss. And you must simply come to me for a handout. So I'm going to spend this money in STEP rather than I provide the necessary platform and training for our people to be able to develop the country and ensure that the people who we want to simply involve in STEP is uplifted, and those persons could now participate in a more meaningful way in this country. Madam President, we've heard it over and over again, it is better to teach someone to fish than to give them one fish. Because if you give them one fish, they will be dependent on you all the time for a fish. And that is where they're going. Let's spend the money in STEP. Every time let's cut grass and so on. Are you developing those people by just spending the money in cutting grass? No, but when you spend the money in the development of your human resource, you're lifting up the capacity of persons to be able to contribute meaningfully. To be able to contribute meaningfully in this country. Oh, we're borrowing, Madam President. All we come to do in this house is to borrow money, and so on, and uplift the debt, etc. As if they never did so. They never did so in their time. But let us look at the history. Let us look at the record. Yes, we're borrowing money. But are there results? Yes, there are results. In 2017 to 2018, 2.5% growth in the economy. In 2018 to 2019, a projected 3.5% growth in this economy. This is the result. When they did their borrowing, what happened? In the 5 years they were in office, the economy actually reneged. There was negative growth for 3 years. 3 years, negative growth. And growth of what? Less than 1%? In the other 2 years? Let's compare that, Madam President. You see, they do not understand the need for us to be able to invest in our people. And that is why they will tell you all sorts of things that when you invest in persons, they believe that you have an ulterior motive. They believe that you have an ulterior motive. Everybody is moving to Dominica and so forth. All the tradesmen in St. Lucia are Dominica because there's nothing happening in the construction sector here. Really? Really? Well, I can tell you. And he should be here to hear that. Why are those people, some of them, which he himself has actually assisted to go to Dominica, are returning to St. Lucia today? And they are working in St. Lucia? I am very happy when our people can provide support to our brothers and sisters in a neighboring country. We know what happened in Dominica. We know about the disaster. And if there is employment opportunity, fine. We are all CARICOM nationals. We are members of the OECS. We should
There should be no barriers for us to be able to work, etc. But don't come and tell me there is no activity in the construction sector here. I know of construction companies here that cannot find enough persons to work with them, skilled persons to work with them, right? Okay, and there are no people in Bexar, no people left in Bexar. There are persons in Bexar that are working all over the place, right, within the construction sector. So where are we going with this, Madam President? Where are we going with this? We need to always invest in our people. Our civil servants, they are hardworking persons. We are not perfect. We are not perfect. Sometimes, I mean, within the civil service and also within this country, we can do a lot more to improve on our productivity. I believe that. And I believe when we set up frameworks and we set up opportunities for refresher programs and for training, we would be able to improve on the product that we present and also improve more. So we need to look to improve on our productivity. This is one of the areas we are lacking in this country. So, will you give, Madam President, will you simply take your 16-year-old son and just hand this person the keys to a brand new vehicle to just drive down the road without first teaching this person how to drive? Will you do so? No, the answer is no, right? You need, first of all, this person needs to go through a theory exam, and secondly, go through a practical exam, and when we are satisfied enough, you then would be able to give this person this vehicle. And of course, if it is a vehicle, especially if it is a minibus within the transportation sector and so on, this person has to go through a number of tests and a series of tests to be able now to be driving on the roads and to be doing so for economic purposes for themselves and their family to earn a living. But more so, there are refresher programs. I think there is the, what's the program called? I think there is a program after you get your license that you have to go and do, right? Okay? Right? Defensive driving programs. And minibus operators and so on, I think have many others to do. It is the same way, Madam President. Within the public service, we need to be able to continue training our people. The member opposite said it right. We have 2 Nobel laureates. Did those 2 Nobel laureates just became Nobel laureates overnight? Did they never in their lifetime go through a process of training? Did they never in their lifetime go through the process of workshops? Of course. Of course. And that is why we need to continue to train our people. Madam President, the approach of this government is very different. And you could see the results. Whereas the focus with them is let's just cut grass. Yes, grass needs to be cut. I agree. Grass needs to be cut. But I believe instead of simply allowing especially our young men and women to simply go out and cut grass, let us educate our people. Let us train our people. Let us have workshops starting with the civil service and the civil servants, and let them be able to pass on that information and be able to better serve our people. Let our young people be more involved in proper economic activities. Prepare the platform. Prepare the base for them to be able to develop. And that is what we're doing. And in order to do so, you must invest. And in order to invest, you must spend money, Madam President. So when we hear of all those sociologists' ideology, etc., we need to put it aside and we need to be able to determine carefully where we are going in this country, and for what purpose we're doing so. And I believe this government is on the right track. I believe that setting up a framework, setting up a performance management unit, okay, for delivery is brilliant. It would assess the performance of our civil servants. It would be able to give us the platform for them to be more accountable, right, and for them to be able to be appraised properly, for them to have workshops, and for them to be able to deliver what it is supposed to be delivered for our persons and for our citizens in this country, and to also improve on our productivity. I thank you, Madam President.
Senator Thomas Francis.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues. Madam President, it is noted that the borrowing under this motion is required to finance services of consultants to conduct the implementation of lab workshops and to set up a performance management and delivery unit. My understanding is that government will be conducting workshops to train officials in the process of performance management and also training to embark on the preparation of strategic plans. Madam President, training and development is very, very critical in ensuring efficiency and productivity in any establishment, whether you talk in private sector or you talk in public sector. I will never ever underestimate the importance of training. Indeed, I am involved in training in a significant way. I lecture in organizational behavior, I lecture in leadership, and training in performance management specifically is one aspect of the training that I do. So I will never ever underestimate the importance of training. However, Madam President, I have some questions as it relates to the motion. The quantum $11 million to undertake workshops and training, based on my own experience, because I have participated in lots of training programs, facilitated training programs. In my former life, as a senior executive, I was involved in the planning of training on a local and sub-regional level. 11 million is exorbitant. It is very exorbitant. It's unprecedented, I would say. I have some questions, though, and maybe the answers to those questions might provide some clarity as to, why that amount. I think what would have been useful here today is some kind of detail as to how the funds will be applied. If we are borrowing 11 million for training and for workshop, to me it would be very useful if we knew how those funds were going to be expended. What are the elements of cost that will analyze? What are the elements of cost that you have planned for to justify an expenditure of $11 million for training? Honorable Leader of Government Business mentioned that the training has already begun, and indeed I was watching the news last night and there was a news item suggesting that the training is indeed in effect already. From what I noticed, there was a foreign consultant involved in the training. How was that consultant recruited? Was it through an open bidding process? Did we have the opportunity, or was the opportunity given to local consultants to be able to submit bids to undertake such training? Madam President, as a country, having invested such significant quantums from our fiscal budgets over the last years to educate our people, we have people with masters, we have lots of people with bachelor's degrees. I believe we have people with doctorates that far exceed what other countries have. So I believe we do have a cadre of professionals with the requisite skills who could have undertaken that level of training. So I would like to know what process was used to recruit the consultant to be able to get that job done. And, Madam President, I would also like to know whether there will be developmental training in project management and preventative maintenance. Our country is in a state of crisis at this point in time, Madam President, especially as it relates to our health sector, because we've commissioned the construction of 2 hospitals, I would say 3 for that matter, St. Jude's Hospital, OKU, and Dennery. And all 3 have halted because the elements of project management that are so critical to ensuring successful execution and completion of projects have not been applied sufficiently well to ensure that we protect the country's investment. I'm not about getting involved in who should take responsibility. That's not my role. My role is to highlight the fact that as a country with educated professionals, there seems to be a huge gap in terms of the application of knowledge, the applications of skills that have been acquired through education to ensure that projects are implemented successfully. Madam President, I am keenly awaiting a response from the Leader of Government Business as to whether performance management and project management specifically will be undertaken in that level of training. I spoke about preventative management a while ago, Madam President. Ever so often, we hear about mold infestation in public buildings. Right now, it has become a nuisance. It is painful to hear that school has just reopened and students have to remain at home, unable to attend school because we have infestation in a school that was built, I think, about 10 years ago. You hear of a school which is 40 years old, which is in a dilapidated state, will cost $13 million to repair, thus we may have to relocate or do away with the school. The school is 40 years old. A 40-year-old building should not need to be relocated or demolished because we did not do preventative maintenance properly. What does not get fixed or attended to fester? So when we're talking about buildings that are old, a 40-year-old building is not old. This is not old. The former Barclays Bank building on Bridge Street is over 150 years old, and it is standing. The original building is standing. All the bank has done over the years is to retrofit the interior. The building is still. The Royal Bank building has been there for over 80 years. First National Bank building, 80 years. All these buildings are standing there. Nobody's talking about doing anything with them. Preventative management is the problem, and I believe we do have to ensure that while we are expending such large sums on training, excuse me, Madam President. Thank you for your patience, ma'am. While we are expending such a significant sum on training, we take into consideration training in preventative management, premises management, and to me it is easy. It is easy to be done. When you look at countries like the UK or other countries in Europe, Madam President, you have buildings that are 1,000 years old, 500 years old, 800 years old, and they are still standing, Madam President. You know why they're still standing, Madam President? Preventative maintenance. Mold is not something that cannot be addressed. Why do we have to replace a building because of mold? I would like to ensure, and of course the Leader of Government Business will tell me whether that aspect, or these aspects rather, have been taken into consideration when we're talking about training. And Madam President, this brings me to the question of debt. Our debt profile is significant. It's not me saying that. The figures are there. In the last IMF report, and if you permit me, Madam President, I will quote, directors know, and I'm talking about IMF, executive conclusion in the 2018 Article 4 consultation with St. Lucia, which was released on the 20th of June 2018. And I quote, directors noted that while the rapid increase in infrastructure investment is necessary to address constraints to growth, the ensuing increase in public debt and the risk associated with its repayment heighten fiscal vulnerabilities. Heighten fiscal vulnerabilities. In this regard, they stress the need for an adjustment aimed at attaining the ECCU debt target of 60% of GDP by 2030. And Madam President, if you so desire, I can make this a document of the House.
Please do so, Senator.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, sorry. Madam President, we are nowhere close to attaining the 60% debt to GDP ratio as prescribed by the central bank. I do know that in this honorable House, government has spoken about some strategies aimed at better managing the debt portfolio such that government can get close enough to achieving the target or achieving the target. The level of borrowings that we've seen in recent times, Madam President, does not reflect that we are on the road to getting there soon enough. Madam President, I am concerned. Why am I concerned, Madam President? This is not the first time that the country is receiving caution from the IMF. I think in every review in the last few years, IMF has been cautioning St. Lucia to manage the debt position. So one would expect that there would be a comprehensive strategic document telling us what are the specific strategies that will be implemented to reduce the debt in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term, and have some kind of action plan to let us know what, whom, how, and by when we will achieve that and what will success look like as we do our trend analysis. I think this would be very, very useful, Madam President. Madam President, I mentioned that I am concerned. I don't think I'm the only person concerned about the debt level. My concern was even more heightened given the situation with Barbados. Barbados was in a similar position, Madam President, where the country was being cautioned similarly about the debt levels. The cautions were ignored. Where is Barbados today? We all know it. Banks had to take a haircut on their investments. Public servants are being retrenched, over 1,000 of them, I gather. And it is now a very painful exercise, and the last thing we want is to find ourselves in that kind of predicament. I think the Barbados experience is a good one for us. There are good lessons that we can learn, and it is hope that the government will take heed. Madam President, on this note, I think I will request that my concerns be addressed. I wish the government success in the implementation of the training program, but I would like to, understand a little better, based on the questions that I have asked, specifically, how do we plan to spend $11 million, and how do we justify the cost of $11 million for training of that nature? Thank you very much, Madam President.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I rise to just give a few pointers. I want to congratulate the independent Senator, Lucia Francis, for her in-depth analysis of this motion. So I'm very happy for that. I also want to start by saying that I've never denied my roots. Yes, I was a proud member of the St. Lucia Labour Party for a short time. I was a member of the party that reflected on the morals and attributes of persons like George Charles, Olivier Jean-Baptiste, Burke, King, Kenneth Foster,
Madam President,
Peter Josie.
point of order, 37-1. Member should confine his contribution. When you rise to speak to a motion, that's
Please proceed, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Madam President. And Peter Josie, Honorable Remy Lesmore, and George Odlum. I am now a member of the United Workers' Party, proud member of the United Workers' Party, because I've realized that this is the party that can give to St. Lucians what is required. This bill, this motion is being submitted so that the government can implement some of the programs that it has promised the St. Lucians that it would do. So we have 3 social and 3 economic. On the social side, we have crime, health and education, economic, tourism, agriculture, and infrastructure. And as we heard at the independent senator talking about the maintenance of buildings, project management, and so on. And it is very opportune that you would say that. And you mentioned some of the programs that are now being stalled because of the lack of proper project management. I will not say any more on that. The Labour Party is always pregnant with ideas and opportunities, but can never deliver. This is not only systemic to the Labour Party. I think the United Workers' Party also has a problem with implementation. And implementation, with all the good ideas and programs that you have, without proper implementation, we will not go any further than where we are at this time. The company that has been recruited, Permandu, is a Malaysian company and has helped Malaysia and other countries to do exactly what we are asking them to do here. The senator wanted to find out whether bids were sent out and whether it was done locally. I must tell her that the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, is the company that engaged the Permandu company. So we don't just do things, we do it in a proper manner. The $11 million that we talked about and we said for the labs and so on, there are other things that need to come with the labs. It's not just sitting down and speaking, but there is work to be done, especially like with crime. Persons are going out, and there is going to be a survey on the fear of crime, confidence in the police force, and we are even going to be talking about something like cultivation of hemp to see whether we can get employment for our people. So it is not just sitting in the labs, but going out there and engaging the public as to what their views are on the way that we can improve the economy of this country. The leader of opposition business talked about our employees going over to Dominica to work. And he made it sound in such a derogatory manner that I really felt bad. To me, it is a testimony of the professional attitude of our workers in St. Lucia that you can make sure that you have your workers from St. Lucia in Dominica assisting you. And we must congratulate those who have left their families in St. Lucia and gone across to Dominica to help our sister island in recovering. So that's a good point. It's just anything degrading about persons leaving the country and go and work overseas. If we know the history of St. Lucia, we will understand that there was a time when our St. Lucians used to go to Guyana and Panama and Barbados, and some of us are still going to the United States of America. So it is not anything different that is happening. And I commend those workers, and I hope that they do a very, very good job in Dominica, so that the next time the Dominican party wants them, that they can be called upon. The leader of government, of opposition business, talked about and posturing about the civil servants, how they love the civil servants, and how good our civil servants are. But history will tell us that the St. Lucia Labour Party has no respect for our civil servants. When they came in, they sent all the permanent secretaries home and installed their own permanent secretaries. The 5% to cut the wages of civil servants.
Point of order, Madam President. 47-1, the member has continued his presentation away from the subjective motion of borrowing and is now castigating the Labour Party. I do not see where that comes as part of the presentation.
Honourable Minister, would you confine your observations to the motion at hand? Rebuttals will be by the leader of government business. However, I would say that one can make observations without reference to a question that was posed that is rightly and should be answered by the leader of government business.
Very well, Madam President, I will so do, and I will hope that my leader will pick that up and continue in that vein. But we have persons like Edwin St. Catherine, and he talked about how brilliant our civil servants are. In the 2011 budget of the United Workers' Party, presented by the Honorable Stevenson King, when he gave certain figures about the rate of growth, I'm sure you remembered what your leader at the time said. Sir Dwight Venner, governor of the ECCB, when he gave indicators of how we should manage our economy, you can then ask your leader as to what his response was to Sir Dwight Venner. You know, this is the attitude, Madam President, and it is strange that we would come up with some of the things that we are doing. I give my full support for this motion, and I can assure the St. Lucian public that we will see better implementation of some of the things that we want to do for our country. Thank you.
Senator Ferdinand.
Thank you, Madam President. Happy to be back with my colleagues. I want to join the previous colleagues before me in congratulating first St. Lucians, as well as the West Indies women's cricket team for making us very proud. I'm still wearing one of the bands, ICC P20, very proudly. My colleagues may observe the color if they wish, but it's not the issue. I think we know that anytime West Indies is doing well, the region is happy. People have even claimed that productivity goes up. And so anything that would, bring success to our people in the region is great. And I'm very happy that St. Lucia, our country, was part of that success. And the Darren Sammy Stadium got some very good marketing. And I hope that future competitions hopefully will come our way. And I think everyone will agree that maybe it was a very good investment by the St. Lucia Labour Party to build that stadium that we're all very proud of today. So once again, Madam President, I am very happy to associate with all the comments that were made about the West Indies cricket team. To the motion, Madam President, that refers to the borrowing of this sum of money for the purpose of financing and the services of consultants, and I note that keyword, to conduct implementation labs, workshops, etc., and performance management and delivery. I would not at any time find any difficulty in any country making sure
Proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, I was saying I would not have any difficulty with any country that engages in any activity to improve its capacity to implement or to deliver quality governance. I have no difficulty with that. We know that almost every nation engages in building that kind of capacity. But, Madam President, my question is, it's threefold. First of all, given the fiscal situation that we currently are aware of and our current debt situation, public debt, do we really believe that at this time, that this is the right time and this is the right activity that the government should engage in, particularly when we look at the sum of money that's being borrowed? My other observation is the timing of this initiative. The government came into office on the premise that it will deliver and it will make things right that were not right. 2.5 years into government, this is being done. Why is it being done now? And if so, what has the government been doing in the last 2.5 years? That requires that we now want to borrow $11 or $13 million from the CDB for training, essentially for someone to tell us, to come and tell us what we need to do and how we need to do it. 2.5 years into government. So I'm very concerned about what this has to do with the timing of this move and why now. My third concern is, Madam President, I totally agree that it is important to build capacity and to train persons. But where do you start that? Is that something you begin when you have hired trained professionals? Most of the people in the public service, our public servants, did not receive their training after they became employed. Their basic qualifications, experience, their CV is what would have allowed them to become employable. Of course, knowledge has evolved and you must do continuous training and refreshing. But they would have been qualified to get those positions based on what they bring to the table. And so we cannot think as a country that it is the government training on the job that will make our public service more efficient and more effective. My argument here, Madam President, is where does the training begin? Or where should it begin? And so instead of borrowing $13 million 2 years into government, 2.5 years into government, to have seminars and workshops and labs, whatever you want to call it, shouldn't we have considered spending that money at the right time, in the right place? And one of our colleagues mentioned the platform that we are creating for training and professionals. That platform, Madam President, the best place to start is in school. This is the first place people get training. And it's not only in skill and in delivery of projects. It's the basic training that makes it difficult later on, if they don't get it from the beginning, that it makes it difficult for us as professionals to train them. They are people that have been considered to be not trainable because they have attained degrees, they have, they have been qualified. But there are some basic principles and ethical practices that they have not learned. And school is one of the places, Madam President, we must never underestimate that. I know that everybody know that I relate very well to the school system. But I believe in it. And I think that instead of training, well, I'm not saying instead of focusing your training and your resources at that level, you need to focus a lot more on the point at which the training is more effective and more efficient. And that is in the school system. So while we go out there and we want to borrow all that money to pay people to tell us what most of us already know, that's a fact. Most of us already know. And that may be the reason why one may speculate about the public servant's attitude towards the training. But instead of doing that, Madam President, why can't some of that money, or why can't that borrowing be targeted more towards a long-term strategy and a proper education plan that will make it less necessary for us to spend that kind of money on people who have been trained and who have been qualified and who are now holding very important positions in the public service. Madam President, based on the explanation provided by the leader of government business, a number of areas were identified. So we've been told that the money is needed to borrow so that we can provide that training in 6 areas, 3 social and 3 economic. We were told education, healthcare, and tourism, I think on crime, were the 3 areas of social characteristics, and agriculture, tourism, and infrastructure were the areas of economics. Madam President, I will not attempt to speak to all the other areas, but if we want to know what is wrong with the system, whether it is, for example, the judiciary or the education system, it is important that we speak to the practitioners in the system. We don't make assumptions that, because if you're going to do implementation workshops or consultants, people need to know when they come to speak to us, what exactly is the problem they're speaking to. So if you're going to have a workshop, for example, on implementation of a project in education, you have to hear from the practitioners of education who will inform you of what the issues are that need to be addressed. Otherwise, you'll be coming to do something without any focus. So I suppose the leader of government business will elaborate on that when he gets to rebut. Madam President, while we were listening to the justification provided for the borrowing for all of these seminars and workshops, I want to ask whether we really need those consultants to come and tell us what we need to do about, let us say, Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, because education is one of the areas that was identified. Do we really need a consultant to come and tell us what we need to do about Sir Arthur? In the last year alone, haven't we had enough indicators of the problems or the nature of the problems that occur? Whether it is related to the building, whether it is related to the management of Sir Arthur Lewis, where you have the board that resigned in entirety, whether it has to do with the programs that are being offered. the types of programs that are being offered that you may want to review, the curriculum and so on. Do we really need any consultant from Malaysia or wherever to come to tell us what we should do about this, Madam President? Haven't our practitioners, our lecturers at Arthur Lewis, our students' council, our students themselves, haven't those people clearly articulated the concerns that we are dealing with? It has been ventilated very well in the media. And so when we go and sit and do those consultations, we have to ask ourselves, to what end? What is it that we are going to achieve? When I had training, I expect that there's going to be a component that will measure the success of the training. And in all of the deliberations that I've heard, I have not really heard of any mechanism to measure the success or the value that is going to be given for the use of this training program. Right? I know you'll probably do your little evaluation and so on, but this is just, ceremonial. When you're going to invest that kind of money in any program, you need to have some performance indicators, something that will measure the value of the investment that you're making, if you call it an investment. So I haven't heard that. So I'm hoping that there's some kind of, and I know that one may argue that you will have to wait to see how it plays out in the people in which you have trained. But since the CDB is lending us money, I am sure that as a country, our performance indicators have to be, there. And so we have to make sure that upfront that this is, even at least the expectations are outlined. I haven't heard much of that, Madam President. Now, I mentioned Sir Arthur Lewis, and I want to mention a few departments that I think we can turn to that can give us quite a lot of what we are paying for. We are paying a lot of money for information or for delivery of information that we actually have the capacity to deliver. And I'm not really going to get into the argument of the public servants, because we know that we have competent public servants. And some of them sometimes do not do what we expect of them all the time. They are human. But in the main, I think we can say that our public services in Lucia has a high percentage of very committed and hardworking people. But, Madam President, if we say so, we also have some organizations that are made up of public servants that can provide us with quality feedback and direction as to how we go about doing what we do, that we do not have to spend that money on consultants. I'll just give 3 examples associated with education. We have the Curriculum and Management Department. We call it CAMDU in short. This department is staffed with trained professionals in curriculum development. People who go through the education system in St. Lucia. The government, in some cases, spends money to ensure that these people receive quite a lot of upgrade and ongoing training. Every professional in that department is someone who has been well trained and educated in the field of curriculum development. It's been 2 years, 2 years and a half. Not at once or not one time have I heard anything in the policies of this government, particularly in education, referring to any of those departments that have been set up to do just that. We can also look at another partner, the teachers' union, the unions. The unions do have people who understand the plight of workers, and they also have concerns about some of the things that are not going well within the public service. And if we want to be effective in implementation of our programs, the unions can give us a lot of guidance, and we need to engage them. And sometimes when we do those consultancies, we do so without engaging our trade unions, and we miss out on opportunities where we can get proper information that can allow us to address the correct problems or the right problems. Madam President, another good example, and I'm very, very well familiar with this one because I've worked with them, is the National Principals Association. Some of the issues that we intend to address by bringing consultants, and I have been at some of those workshops, Madam President, when we have had to sit and listen to professionals who are highly paid, telling us things that we know, and it's true. But as decent people, as principals who have been granted the government's time to go and sit to listen, we will show some respect. But the truth is, a lot of the time, we do know and we understand exactly what they're saying because we're familiar with the information. And so I am saying to you that I am part of the experience that we have had as public servants, where this kind of thing is being done, and we sit there and we wonder whether it wasn't better for somebody to ask us what we think and to direct those resources towards the institutions that we run. Of course, with some measures of accountability to allow us to fix the problems.
True.
We have to start demonstrating a little more confidence in the human resource base in this country, Madam President. We need to. And I know this is not the first or the last time we're going to have consultation. I am not going to deny that previous governments have had consultants. Yes, but it cannot be about that. And I think one of our members, the independent member, mentioned the exorbitant sum of money. Why are we spending all of that money and we're saying things are hard? We're taking cuts here and there. We're asking people to take lump sum and so on, and instead of delivery increases, and we are spending all this money for people to tell us what we already know. Madam President, these three entities that I identified, I think that between them or among them, we could have saved ourselves quite a few $1 million that we could have put back into their organizations, maybe not directly, but indirectly, or spent in areas that they would have seen as priority and guide the government. Because I don't think that everything we need to know exists somewhere in the cloud out there. Madam President, it doesn't. The culture of a country, the culture of its public service must be understood. Some of these consultants come in here, Madam President, particularly those from foreign firms who have very good reputations. Their background and the understanding of the people that they're talking to is not accurate. People need to be able to relate to what they're telling you. Some of the models that have been presented to us, Madam President, are not congruent with our current system. And I can give you examples. I have gone to consultations when the models of Singapore, Canada, Finland have been recommended. Of course, best practice. Best practice is good. But some of the principles or not the principles, but the practices that have been recommended through these models, we have, as practitioners, have had to question them because they do not relate to the realities that we face in our country. So we don't go and pick up things wholesale, and people from foreign countries who have evidence of things that have worked in metropolitan countries in a different culture, in a different background, think that what we need to do is to go and sit and listen to them and try to implement those things in our system, which is very different. And that is why I always refer to the value of the contribution of the St. Lucian public servants to those kinds of initiatives. I'm not saying that you cannot do consultancy. I mean, we know that. But it must redound to some kind of value. You cannot spend all that money and it actually does not redound to what you are looking to do, your objectives, because you have decided to leave out some very important entities within your system that can guide you. Madam President, thirdly, I listened to the way that this thing was being justified. And I get the impression that we believe in this country that some of the things that we are doing on behalf of public servants, particularly when it involves borrowing money, is basically a favor, or we're granting them this because they need it. Madam President, governments are elected to serve and to provide the country with security, with its needs. And I think we need to start moving away from that type of mindset. And it is particularly so in the aspect of this borrowing that relates to the social areas. Crime, education, and I think the other one was health. Yeah, right? What we must accept and understand in any society, and the model societies, the model economies in the world, can teach that to us, that it is the responsibility of the state, the responsibility of government to provide a quality health service or health system, quality education, and a safe environment for its citizens. It is the responsibility of the state. Now, nobody has said that there is no good in partnering with businesses and entities to enhance those institutions. We know some of the top universities in the world actually have very good alliances with businesses, and they basically run themselves. They're self-sufficient. But note at what level that happens. That is well into the tertiary level. But when you listen to our Prime Minister equating investment in Sir Arthur Lewis in terms of school fees of $9,000, equating that output squarely on a monetary value, how much it will cost to educate a child. Of course, we need to know that. That's good for planning. But it's not only about the monetary value, Madam President, when you invest in education. When you spend money in education, first of all, it is your duty as a state to provide your citizens with a quality education. But the dollars you spend in education, it's not about the dollar value alone, Madam President. It is also about the social value. Countries that have invested well in their education system do not have to deal with some of the issues we have now. They are benefits. I just want to use, for want of a better word, incremental benefits, exponential benefits, Madam President, in investing in a good, solid education system. And I have to say that for the 2.5 years I've been around in this political arena, I have not heard one policy statement with all the money that we're borrowing to say, where are we going with this system? I am very passionate about it, and I am very worried at this time, Madam President. So when $13 million is being borrowed, and one of the social sectors was identified as education, I got a little optimistic. But when I'm hearing it's just consultation, consultants, when we have all those other issues, and our other members have mentioned them before. My alma mater and that of the leader of government business and several other members of this house, my colleague senators, our alma mater, 40 years old, never a subject of discussion as priority. All of a sudden, it needs to be fixed so badly that it needs to be removed. Madam President, these are some of the things that our government is to be addressing and borrowing money for. Why is consultancy a priority? To tell us things we know when we have issues that are critical that need to be addressed and are being put back as if they're not priority. Our premier, I've said it so many times, our premier educational institution is in limbo. As I said, from the structural perspective, or from the administrative end, you know. So what is it that we're borrowing all that money for? Madam President, I want to wrap up. So I want to say in closing that if we want to wait until people have been employed in our public service and think that we can throw money around to train them and to do workshops, and that is going to solve our implementation programs, we are making a big mistake. Let us spend that money to develop a more efficient, a more structured, progressive education, health, and social sector that is going to serve to prevent some of the problems we have to try to fix at the highest level of the public service. It is very difficult, Madam President, for people to unlearn habits that they have picked up because they were not nipped in the bud. And as an educator, I place a high value on the importance of investing, not spending money and talking about $9,000 per child. That is peanuts, Madam President.
True.
Compared to the value of the education of one St. Lucian. So when we talk about spending money, it's as if we are afraid of putting our money into our education to expand the early childhood development programs, to ensure that teachers, principals, and parents are comfortable where they work, to ensure that we have a comprehensive plan that will tell us what our priorities are for our young people, to keep them off drugs and so on, to give my dear colleague in national security a little breathing space, and to relieve my dear colleague in the Ministry of Health from all of the issues that we face. When are we going to realize that we need to begin to put that kind of investment directly into the education system with proper policies? That's what we need to do, Madam President. This is not something we have to go and take from the sky. You don't allow your system to get to a point where you now have to target your top public servants, your PSCs, your middle managers. You know, when people have got to that level, they would have learned a lot of bad habits. They would have worked in the system for years, and they know how to play around it. They will attend the workshops. They will show, they will sign the register. They will come. And I don't think they come with with bad intentions. They come hoping to learn something new. A lot of people have a very positive attitude to learning. I'm one of them. I always think there's something to learn somewhere. So whenever I'm invited to anything where I think there is something to learn, I will go. But when you get there, Madam President, and there is nothing new, given the amount of money we were spending, then we know that it's a bad investment. So my plea this morning is that the government needs to consider where, at this time, with this tight fiscal space that we have, where it needs to be spending that kind of money to show and convince us St. Lucians that it's money well spent, that it's money worth spending, and that it has some kind of incremental value to us in the future. So, Madam President, I hope that I will get the courtesy of my colleagues, or at least my colleague from the lead of government business, to alleviate some of my fears and concerns about, first of all, and I just remind again, just to make sure that it's still fresh in the mind, of, first of all, why now? Why now? Why are you trying to find out what you need to do 2 years after you've been in government? You should have known that when you went on the campaign platform. Why now? Secondly, Madam President, why, and you see this thing about you didn't do it, and I have made my position very clear about that. I really hope that this morning, Madam President, we will not be hearing, you know, you didn't do it in 15 years, why should I do it? Madam President, the point is, it needed to be done, and you said you were going to do it. Now do it. Just do it. Okay? So, 2 years into government, that's my first concern. 2 years into government, or 2.5 years, you have almost passed midterm. You are now going to find out what you need to do. I am very concerned. And as I said, Madam President, I'm also very concerned about why, the third point that I was making was, why is it that the system that is being used to help us find out what we need to know, the information has to come from outside, possibly professionals who have no cultural background and understanding of how our system works. And I think it would be important if that kind of information is ventilated here. So I look forward to the response of my colleagues, and I hope that if we have to come back here to borrow, that I will not have a reason to ask those very same questions that I have asked before. In other ways, but I've asked them before. Okay? Thank you, Madam President, and I do hope that these responses will be forthcoming.
Senator Gideon.
Thank you, Madam President. And I want to join in the collective congratulating of the West Indies female team in St. Lucia, their performance, and also the unwavering support they received from the St. Lucian public, coming and stir them up and giving them the enthusiasm and the courage to fight and to be victorious. Madam President, it is always, for me, heartbreaking and very fearful when we sit here, and the matters we discussed mostly, I must say mostly, is that of borrowing monies to undertake seemingly, for me, projects that are coming in from the sky. Because when you read in the estimates, it is true we have monies concerning consultancy. Monies have been borrowed for consultancy projects, and at the end of it, when we follow, the question always comes to mind: why so much money? Why we come to this house and every time we borrow money, we have a chunk of it going to consultancies? I am afraid, because of the warnings of the IMF, warnings of the central bank, telling us, as my dear colleague said a while ago, that we need to be very careful with the amount of borrowing that as a government we plunge ourselves into. Because it is not us that will be faced with the responsibility of going out and work to repay. It's going to be my child, your child, and their children that will be faced with the problem of paying taxes to repay such debt. Now, are we already, even before these children go into the field of work, are we already burdening them with so much responsibility? I had a rough calculation, Madam President, and surprising to me that for this year, quite a lot of borrowing has been done. Apart from what was in the budget, the 738 million plus, we have added burdens, added debt burdens. We have 150 million, which will be coming soon, as they say, for the airport project. Again, we had the Minister of Economic Affairs saying that his government, his Prime Minister was so good that they were able to get an extra 50 million. When we total, we have pretty close to, in 1 year, pretty close to, or even more, $1.5 billion being borrowed. And I still think there is more to come. Madam President, as my dear colleague said a while ago, the very same questions I had in mind. In 6 weeks, we are borrowing for just 6 weeks in US, $4.9 million for consultancy. If you want to put it in local terms, as they said, pretty close to 11 or $13 million for just 6 weeks of consultancy. If you put that by a week, you have almost $2 million a week for consultancy. As I said, and I'm going to say that I have every faith in the public service. I believe in the work of the public service. Though, as a teacher, I prided myself in the work that I did. But let us put all jokes aside, Madam President. $13 million, 6 weeks. I have a simple question. How many St. Lucians would benefit from this? How many St. Lucians literally would benefit from this 13 million EC dollars? I think that more serious thought should be given, especially when it comes to borrowing money. At this point in time, at this present point in time, borrowing $13 million, and we have a 6-week seminar. Anybody would expect substantial, clear undertakings thereafter. If I'm going to spend $13 million to trade, I would expect that those persons, the trainees, would, at the end of the day, put into practice whatever they have learned to meet the ends or the objectives that the government so planned, or I so planned. Because, you see, Madam President, it is not our money. It is not my money that I'm spending. I'm spending the government's money, and I'm thinking that if I'm spending it, it was well thought of. We sat and we agreed that this is what is needed at this point in time, and not anything to do with, let me say, healthcare in a situation that needs to be addressed. Education is in crisis. It needs to be addressed. The crime situation in St. Lucia needs to be addressed. I am saying, from this workshop, will these situations be addressed? Are we going to see, or I'm hoping we see, a turnaround in these 3 areas that I've mentioned? I'm hoping that we see a turnaround. Because it is, for me, like, you know, I chose you to represent me, and therefore, because I chose you to represent me, I don't really need to come to you in critical matters like health, like education, like crime fighting, and sit and discuss. those persons who are involved I think should be the ones to sit. Let us discuss. Let us see what is wrong, like we had the crime symposium. Let us see how we can tackle, and let us put our actions our ideas into play, and let us see how and when these things would be solved. A Malaysian company suggested by the loaner agency to go in and help us solve our problem, in how we could better do our work as public servants to mitigate and help solve the problems that are existing today in our society. I don't know how the Malaysian gentleman would be able to relate locally to his knowledge and see that what ideas he could put in place for the solution. I don't know. So my concern, Madam Speaker, is basically that I think that this government is very rash in plunging our country further into debt. And I think that they should stop, take a look, and see what is it that they are doing to St. Lucia and have a rethink. Better things can be done. And as my colleague said, at this point in time, whilst that may have been an important item, it may have been, but at this point in time, with the situation in St. Lucia, I don't think adding 13 million more to the debt burden is an appropriate thing. I don't think it is at this point, at this present moment where we are, with the IMF asking us to try their best to return that debt to GDP, which they claim they would have, to that 60% thereabout, so that we would have been able to manage and do the things that we want to do. Are they taking these things into consideration? Do they consider this? Do they consider the words of the IMF? Or do they only consider what they think is relevant to them and what they're doing? Or is it a case where, this agency decides, I could give you the money to do it, but whether or not I have to source for you the persons to do it, or whether if you want this money, this is the firm that we know that is best in that particular field, that you take it, implement, and then let us see how it goes on after. I think, Madam Speaker, Madam President, that if we need to take St. Lucia out and talk about economy growing by 2.3 or 2 point whatever, and this year by 3.4 or whatever, the decisions that we make, the decisions we are making and we are taking today, are they on par with that growth level that was spoken of by the IMF? Are they on par? Because the leader of government basis not too long ago, I heard him responding to that question, a question similar to that. And if I'm not correct in what I'm saying, he's right there and he could stop. And his response was, the projected 3.4 may not actually happen because of, one, the projects that were to be implemented, some of them have not been. He spoke about the implementation of the work of the Sandals, the new Sandals Lassus. Yeah, he spoke about that. He said that this project was stopped, and therefore it is possible, and others that he mentioned, it's possible that we may not achieve the 3.4 projected growth. Now, if we are not, why do we still continue to go on and add more debt to the country? Why? Ouais, délai, c'est pas nous qui nous pour une responsabilité pour certains bagailles. Les faits, nous pas mêler. Nous qu'à faire anyway. Mais qualité dette ça là, nous qu'à tuer à dedans, Madame Speaker, Madame President. Ça c'est plus de travail pour l'autre génération qui va venir pour représenter cette lycée. Ça c'est plus de travail pour eux actuellement. Parce que c'est eux qui nous pour nettoyer dette ça. De les moyens pour nous rapatrier, nous reposer dans le coin et nous mort. Et c'est eux qui nous pour venir après pour payer dette ça. So, pour moi c'est that gouvernement supposé catcher les timets plis et pas intuimer les pays à d'autres dettes. Je t'ai blâmé le gouvernement avant. Je t'ai prêté autant d'argent. Et que je suis venu, je dis, et ce n'est pas moi qui a dit, monde qui a dit, que trop l'argent qu'a tapé quoi il prêté. Je dis, trop l'argent. Trop l'argent. Et si nous avons prêté autant, qui est-ce qui a fait pour l'autre temps pour venir? Qui ça nous a quitté pour l'autre année? Et l'année après, c'est plus qui a prêté? Oh, nous avons une position côté, nous avons profité tellement que nous avons bout. Et dit, ok, oui, nous avons rien de bout, nous avons payé tout ça, nous avons payé, et nous avons prêté. We are a thriving economy, small, thriving economy. And I think those persons who are responsible should think a little more, should be a little more understanding, and at least, if not, at least, give St. Lucians a voice to say, yes, gouvernement ça, c'est lui qui a fait le travail là, nous besoin nous. C'est lui qui a fait. Mais santé nous qu'a venir bien, mais éducation en un bon chemin, mais crime nous te parler about nous qu'a baissé, n'a fait, il a baissé et qui bon contrôlé. Et nous avons un bon côté. But today, are we in a good place? Is St. Lucia in a good place financially? Is it? In closing, I repeat, Madam President, that adding to the debt burden of St. Lucia is not a positive sign of any good governance. If you are adding to the debt burden, it is no good sign that the country has been governed in a manner that would save it tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I certainly have a task on my hand now, knowing that almost all members made a contribution to this motion. And as you know, Madam President, it is my role to respond to as much as possible to their contributions. Madam President, whenever there is a motion to borrow money in this House, you could almost predict the responses from the various members opposite. And I want to start this off with just a very simple analogy or example. Just imagine, Madam President, that a father has $500, or a husband, rather, and his wife says to him that she is very ill. And as a good husband, he would say to the wife that I will have to take care of your health needs. And therefore, we must go to the doctor to see exactly what's wrong with you, and if anything, take care of the medical bills and so on. And when he gets there with the wife, Madam President, the wife says, but the children need food, books for school. Why are you paying medical bills for me? And then he says, okay, then I will go ahead and buy the books for the children. And he takes her with her to the bookstore, and while she's buying the books, Madam President, she's saying to the husband, well, the house is leaking, so we need to buy some galvanized for the house. This is exactly what's happening with the opposition, Madam President. The government is borrowing money in areas it sees the need for. And every time we do so, Madam President, they are saying, why don't you use the money for this? The money for that? The money for this? We have to understand, Madam President, we are working, trying to deal with a situation where we have limited funds, but competing ends. And therefore, as a government, we are the ones, the people of St. Lucia, elected to decide as to which ones are the priority for us and for them. So to come to the House every time that we're borrowing money and saying we should do this instead of this argument is flawed. And it's very consistent, Madam President, with the opposition. Very consistent. Another consistent thing, Madam President, that comes from the opposition is that we always come to the House to borrow money. But let me remind the members opposite, Madam President, that we have already appropriated monies for that. The appropriation bill has already been approved earlier in the year. We have the authority, we got the authority to borrow, Madam President, and therefore we must come to the House to get the authority through these motions. So that's what we do every time. Again, it is about using the authority we got from the appropriations bill. The appropriations bill gave us that authority to borrow through the year for the various projects and services of government. But before we go out to borrow the money, we must get the authority in the House through these motions. So that's why we have to come here all the time. This is what you need to understand. This is what you need to understand. And I'm hearing also, Madam President, from this House that we're borrowing over 750 and stuff like that. Madam President, again, we have a limit in the amount of money we must borrow as far as loans are concerned. We have a limit. So we have loans, we have bonds, we have treasury bills. And we cannot go above this limit. And if we have to come with a supplemental budget, Madam President. And we have not gotten to that point as yet, Madam President. In fact, what you are seeing now in terms of the borrowings, is that we are swapping our loans for bonds, Madam President. That's what we are doing. That's what we're doing. So we are lengthening our payment period. So we are still within the approved 2018-19 budget. That's what the opposition needs to understand clearly. And now we are here, the motion here is to borrow this amount of money to train our public officers. And all you are hearing from the opposition is borrowing for consultancies, for consultants or consultants. This is not the objective of the borrowing. It's about training our public officers to deliver on the services and the projects that we have put together. Simple as that, Madam President. But I'm hearing a lot of contradictory statements from the opposition also. Very contradictory. At one point in time, they would say that we have competent public officers, but yet still they are hitting out at the very public officers that they are calling competent, or referring to as competent. You know, Madam President, when the leader of opposition business can say to our public officers, Madam President, as the minister responsible for the public service, I take offense to this, by the way. When he can say to our public officers that these workshops and these trainings are designed just for eating sandwiches, tuna sandwiches, and in between they'll rush for their children. Is this the way that you appreciate your public officers? The workers of this country? The people given the responsibility to run the affairs of government? Training? How did these public officers, how did they become the competent officers that you make reference to? It's for training. And that is not new in the public service. In fact, in the last 10 years, over $31 million have been spent in training. $31 million and counting. And training is so important for this administration, Madam President. So important. Very, very soon, I will be taking to cabinet, very soon, where we will be bringing back training in terms of tuition refund, study leave with pay for our public servants. This was something that was taken away from the public officers by the last administration. Did they see the importance of training our public officers? Their public officers want training, Madam President. Some of them cannot wait for the government to do it for them. They want to take it on their own, Madam President, to go ahead and further their education, further their studies. And the last administration took it away from them. And this administration will bring it back very soon, Madam President. Very soon. That's the interest we show in our workers. That's the interest. That's the interest we show in them. With them. And Madam President, you know, the last administration did not show appreciation with our workers to the point where they wanted to be compensated for their hard work. And they said, the last administration said to them, 0, 0, 0. Is this appreciation for your workers? You take away the still live with pay. You took it away from them. And they wanted, Madam President, in a very clandestine way, Madam President, and thanks to my colleague here, while she was the union president, Boucher, the last administration, where they wanted to reduce their salaries by 5%. Is this appreciation for our public officers, Madam President? Certainly not. Certainly not, Madam President. 14.5%. And guess what we did? This administration did, not this current administration, but the previous United Workers' Party administration. In order to show appreciation for our hard-working officers, we gave them 14.5% increase in their salaries. Madam President, this is what you call appreciation. And for the member, the leader, of opposition government, Madam President, business rather, to say to the public officers that when we provide workshops and training for them, it's all about tuna fish sandwich. This is degrading, Madam President, degrading to our public officers. And worse yet, Madam President, the contradictory statements talking about how competent they are. You know, Madam President, we will bring in here unemployment numbers. We will bring in here growth numbers. And they hit at the very same people who prepared these statements. Hit at them. Is this appreciation for our public officers? Absolutely not, Madam President. Absolutely not. So, Madam President, I am very pleased to announce that very, very soon we'll be reinstating the study leave with pay for our public servants. We have already put in a budget for that for the next fiscal year 2019-2020. And Madam President, you know, they make reference to our borrowings as being reckless borrowing. You are saying that if we borrow money to train our people, our workers, our public officers, that's reckless, that's wastage. Is this the way you characterize our public officers? Money is being spent for their development and the productivity of the public service, the efficiency of the public service, and you're calling this reckless and wastage? It clearly shows, Madam President, it clearly shows that the opposition, the St. Lucia Labour Party opposition, has absolutely no respect for our public officers and no appreciation for our public officers through their words and through the deeds.
Time and time again.
You know, Madam President, you know, they like to boast about how we have the best trained public officers in the Caribbean. Best trained. I just wonder, how did they get the training? How did they get the training? And I'm just wondering, Madam President, what happened during the reign of the St. Lucia Labour Party in government? What happened to our public servants? our public officers as far as training is concerned. I have the numbers. I have the numbers here. And you would see, Madam President, both in education and the Department of Public Service numbers, it's always less under St. Lucia Labour Party administration. Always less. Always less. I can show it to you.
Order, please.
Madam President, you know, it also painful to hear the xenophobic attitude of the opposition. Very xenophobic. Talking about a Malaysian consultant and local. Yes, our local people can do things. They can. And we engage them. We engage them. But this particular one, Madam President, this engagement by the consultants was all done through the CDB. All done through the CDB, Madam President. They will set their criteria. They will have their guidelines as to who is competent for undertaking this workshop. It's not like the government of St. Lucia decided to handpick or choose this particular consultant. The criteria, Madam President, was strictly that from the CDB. And I must say to you, based on testimonies coming from some of the attendees so far, they are very, very happy and excited about this workshop. Very excited. So for the opposition to come here and criticize the initiative of this government, Madam President, is for the exposure of almost hatred for the public officers. Almost. Now, Madam President, the independent Senator Francis raised some interesting, always does actually, interesting observations. And I think I have addressed a few of them as far as who chose the consultant. I have already addressed that, the CDB. Of course, CDB will have their guidelines as to who is best suited to undertake this workshop, this training. I trust very well that the CDB would have within this training project management, procurement, and so on. In fact, I must say to you that the government is currently engaging a consultant from the World Bank. Again, it was not the government who selected that consultant, it was for the World Bank, in implementing a procurement system in government. Okay? So that is in stream, and I'm sure, Madam President, that given the fact, again, I have my full confidence in the CDB that with this consultation, that the training will entail the procurement systems and accountability and evaluation factors. Now I'm hearing about $13 million as being a large sum. In fact, the Senator Gideon spoke about the fact that it is, in fact, he broke it down by weeks, $2 million per week. I want probably, Madam President, to advise the gentleman that, not gentleman, but the senator, to get himself acquainted with consultancy fees, especially international consultancies. Okay, get himself familiar with this. It's not, consultancies are big money thing. It's very big money. And that's why I believe this is a new area. And in fact, it's an area I believe that our services sector should push, especially our local ones. There is a lot of money in this thing here. So you talk about it's a large sum of money. But we need to compare the amount with the value of the training. And the Senator Gubian, Ferdinand, who was referred to as a secret weapon during the last campaign, spoke about the value of the dollar that we spend on our students at Sir Arthur Lewis, and which is true. But I want for the member to understand that it's not about the amount of the monies that is being spent right now. It's the value of what is being received by the attendees and from our public officers. Now, Madam President, the Independent Senator Francis made reference to a document, the Article 4 of the IMF, and I know that the members of the lower house, and especially the leader of the opposition leader, always likes to make reference to a particular line within this article. And for emphasis, let me try to read it again. It says here, the directors noted that, based on what the senator read this morning, while the rapid increase in infrastructure investment is necessary, yes, while they're admitting that it is necessary, the airports and the roads, all of these things are necessary, and we don't have the funds available. If it's necessary, it means that we need to get the funds to do what is necessary. Am I right? We need to do it. So they're saying here, while the rapid increase in infrastructure investment is necessary to address constraints to growth, and this current administration, Madam President, understands that growth is necessary, as I said earlier, and we understand the constraints to this growth. And one of the constraints is that of infrastructure. How can we expand this economy, Madam President, with the current state and capacity of our roads and our airport in the south? How can we expand it? So we understand the constraints, Madam President, and we must overcome that constraint. And that is, Madam President, we have to deal with our roads, especially and that of our airport. Continuing, Madam President, the ensuing increase in public debt. And I think the emphasis here is, and the risks associated with this repayment, heightened fiscal vulnerabilities. Now, what are these risks associated with its repayment? In other words, when we go out there, I mean, they understand that we must borrow the money. They understand that. We don't have that money. They understand that. And they're saying the risks associated with the repayment. What's the risk? We have proven it's not a risk. The risk, Madam President, is if you, by borrowing the money for the airport and the roads, what if the revenues that we said that we would be able to receive from the increase in the airport taxes, what if we don't achieve these increased revenues? In other words, what if there is a dip in our tourism numbers, our tourist numbers? What if? But, Madam President, we have proven that it is not the case. In fact, we had the highest, the highest recorded increase in tourism arrival last year. Highest. So the risk of repayment is not there, Madam President, except that there is some kind of 911, a serious recession in North America that will reduce the number of tourist arrivals in our country. I remember also, Madam President, when we said as a government that we would have reduced the VAT from 15% to 12.5%, a 2.5% point reduction. There was that concern. I remember when I met with the IMF officials, they raised that concern as to what will happen to our base revenues. What will happen to it? And I remember talking to the gentleman and telling them, look, the strategy of the government is to create some kind of jump starts in the economy, create some kind of increased consumption, create the level of, increase the level of confidence in both the consumer and the business sector. And Madam President, the following year, when I met with the gentleman, and he saw the numbers, the revenues numbers from VAT, Madam President, I reminded him of the statements and the concerns. Of course, he has to have concerns, Madam President. But I showed him, we proved to him that his concerns, we just turn this around. We turn it around. So the VAT collection, the revenue collection from VAT, Madam President, is almost on par today at 12.5% as it was when it was 15%. And this is all because, Madam President, that policy has worked. It has created some level of economic activity which have generated revenues both for businesses and for the government. So this is not a big concern per se, even if it's written there. And most time, Madam President, it is standard concern of the IMF. You will take any Article 4 where there are increases in borrowings and so on, and a reduction in tax rates, and they will raise the same concern. It's a standard. So we should not be too much concerned about this. And in fact, Madam President, I've heard the members opposite talk about where we as a government said that we will not borrow. We will not borrow. And I remember saying here, in as much as possible, Madam President, in as much as possible, this government will not have any new borrowings, and if we do, it will be one that will be matched by some revenue source. And that's what we did with the airport redevelopment. And that's what we're doing with the road maintenance and rehabilitation. Okay? That's what you're doing, Madam President. And Madam President, as a responsible government in terms of debt management, we have soon to pass a piece of legislation called the fiscal rules, Madam President. The fiscal rule. And this is aimed, Madam President, at ensuring that we reduce our debt to GDP ratio from where it is right now. I think it's close to mid-70s, down to 60%. And we are putting ourselves to the test by having what we call fiscal rules, Madam President, working within our means to ensure that we meet that target of 60%. And there are other targets like your primary surplus and so on, 1.5% and so on. So this is not an irresponsible government. We understand when to borrow, why to borrow, and what to borrow for. What to borrow for, Madam President? You know, when I hear, Madam President, that we should have used that $13 million that we are training our officers use it for STEP. You know, again, it goes to show the thinking. It goes to show the thinking and the myopic thinking of this opposition Labour Party. This $13 million being used to train our public officers to increase efficiencies and productivity in the public sector, suggesting it is reckless borrowing, it is wastage, being used by officers who just want to eat tuna fish sandwich and take breaks to go pick up the children, saying that it should not be used for them, but it should be used for step workers. You know, my goodness. My goodness. A government that prides itself in borrowing $19 million a year. $19 million a year in short-term employment program. $19 million. And over a 4 to 5 year period, spend almost $100 million on STEP program. $100 million in STEP program. Skills have not been developed by these people. It's a bounce and draw on every day, every week, every month, whatever. I'm not sure how they're being paid. Borrowing monies.
Senator,
and you're saying, Madam President...
You have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. And you're saying that borrowing $13 million to advance the skills and the competence of our public servant, you're saying we should not do that, but instead use for step workers. Is this the legacy of the Labour Party? Is this a legacy of the Labour Party? Step workers? I want the opposition, Madam President, to take, for the opposition, to take a walk, or drive rather. Maybe the member for Beaufort North and South can take a walk to Ojo Labs and see exactly how we use the STEP program.
They won't understand.
Let's compare. Let's compare. Building real skills. Building skills and honing skills, Madam President, that these young people can take anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. We believe in training and training right. Not spending money without developing skills. That's the difference, you know, Madam President, with this government and the opposition. That's the difference. The value of the money we're spending. In fact, we cut the STEP budget by half. And the value of what we're achieving with half of that amount is greater and greater and greater than the $19 million that was spent on the STEP program by the last administration. That's the difference. That's the difference. We don't believe, Madam President, if we spend money on training and jobs, we don't want individuals to come to the government year after year and then call them in a hallway or call them in an auditorium prior to elections, make them believe that they were losing the STEP program and tell them that we'll get it again. That's the psychology that the last administration used. That's what they did, pretending that they have come to the end of the STEP program. I remember that. The last Prime Minister called the step workers, you know, at the Dumpalet auditorium. I remember that clearly. You know, in other words, I have fed you over the years. In 4 years, I have fed you. I borrowed $19 million over the years, every year. I have fed you over the years. And we have come almost to the end of our tenure. And I am not too sure if we will do it again, if we can do it for you. But I think we'll do it one more time for you guys. And that is the psychology that you try to use on these workers. Because they knew very well that elections was the following year. That's what they did. But you know what, Madam President? If you do it right, the people would vote for you. If you do it right, the people would vote for you. So, Madam President, I believe that the money that we are borrowing here to hone the skills of our public servants, to make them more competent, to increase their skills, to provide efficiencies and productivity within the public service, to increase the rate of implementation of our projects, Madam President. This borrowing worth the while. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is if Parliament authorize the Minister for Finance to borrow from the Caribbean Development Bank an amount not exceeding US $4,927,210, consisting of a special funds resources portion in the amount of $2,463,605 and an ordinary capital resources portion in the amount of $2 million US $463,605 for the purpose of financing the services of consultants to conduct implementation workshops and to set up a performance management and delivery unit. Be it further resolved that in the case of the special funds resources portion, 1. The loan is repayable in 40 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each due date of the first day of January, first day of April, first day of July, and first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date after the expiration of 2 years following the date of the loan agreement, or on such later due date as the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing, and 2. The interest is payable quarterly at a rate of 1% per annum, withdrawn and outstanding on the amount of the special funds resources portion. B. In the case of the ordinary capital resources portion, 1. The loan is repayable in 40 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each due date of the first day of January, first day of April, first day of July, and first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date after the expiration of 2 years following the date of the loan agreement, or on such later due date as the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. 2. The interest is payable quarterly at a rate of 4.8% per annum, withdrawn and outstanding on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion. And 3. A commitment charge at the rate of 1% per annum is payable quarterly on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion unwithdrawn and which accrues from the 60th day following the date of the loan agreement. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, my apologies, but the second page of my announcements was buried. And so I just want to continue what I wanted to say earlier. That first of all, we've got correspondence from the following senators who are out of state, and that is the Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Tourism, Information, Broadcasting, Culture and Creative Industries, responsible for culture and creative industries, and Senator Adrian Auger. I also wanted to say that the Embassy of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in St. Lucia has regrettably informed the Parliament of the passing of Mr. Ali Rodriguez Araque, Ambassador of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in Cuba. He passed away on November 19, 2018 in Cuba at the age of 81 years. He was a lawyer, politician, and Venezuelan diplomat, and held various positions in the area of economics and oil. We express our deepest condolences to his country, friends, and family. I also wanted to congratulate the St. Lucia OECS swim team who broke 9 OECS records. Special congratulations go out to the following swimmers: Tristan Dorville, Antoine Destang, Carrick Charles, Dandre Blanchard, Jaden Odlum Smith, Renako Daniel, Theron Harrell, Faith Jeffrey. And in keeping with all other senators, I also want to say congratulations to the West Indies team for their victories in the matches played here, women's team, for the matches played here in St. Lucia, and I wish them continued success.
Madam President, I beg that the Senate be suspended for 1 hour for lunch. So 1 hour for lunch. So we shall return here at 20 minutes to 3 o'clock.
Senators, the question is that this sitting of the Senate be suspended for 1 hour. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many who are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
All right. Send the pictures and everything. See that? But here's not good. That won't do anything. Only that was so that piece of it. Only that piece of it. Nobody will give powerful house. Why? Because what are you going to do? No, but you have to have a replacement. They will never replace it. No, but what I'm saying is they will not replace it. What is there? What is there? Yeah, there's a bulldozer along there. So when I go to bulldozer CDC, yeah, bulldozer CDC and everything. Of the asbestos and all that. But this structure, this location, I don't know. I see all of them things, all of that.